Lecture 27, we're going to call it the Second World War, Part 1. I think we'll do two other parts to this. What I want to do is talk about the world wars here in this first lecture, First and Second World War, and talk about them in a general way, draw some contrast, some significances. When you look at these wars from a world history perspective, it kind of changes them a bit. Could we say that the two great wars were European civil wars in the first half of the 20th century? This, of course, admits the worldwide nature of these wars. Yeah, they are fought in Europe, but they're also fought in Asia and elsewhere. Do these wars represent the peak of European or Western power? It would appear that they weaken Western civilization. Certainly decolonization follows these wars. The great imperial projects fall apart. And of course, a bipolar world emerges from the Second World War. The capitalist West organized in NATO, and of course the Soviet Empire centered in the Warsaw Pact. Motives for these wars: modernization, certainly on the parts of some, domination, again, we think of Japan and Germany especially, or a rejection of globalization. Again, Japan, Germany, the Soviet Union appear to be rejecting that system that we've been talking about over the course of the semester, the core and its peripheries. Racial purity, certainly on the part of the Germans, there is a drive for uniformity and racial purity. Search for resources, absolutely, industrial and agricultural. And we'll get into them in more detail for this. There are similarities and differences between the two world wars. Certainly the intentions of some of the belligerents are fundamentally different. Utter domination in the Pacific by the Japanese, utter domination of much of Eurasia by Germany. This is quite different from the war aims of the combatants in World War I, where an expansion of power or territory was sought, not the complete reordering of the international system. World War I remained traditional in its aims, unlike the Second World War. In World War I, few states were slated to disappear, perhaps Serbia if Austria-Hungary had prevailed, perhaps Belgium if Germany had prevailed. Few peoples were scheduled to disappear. The one example I can think of off the top of my head are the Armenians, driven out of southern and eastern Turkey into the deserts, with many millions of people killed through starvation, exposure, etc., etc. Imperialism remained a context for many before, during, and after the First World War. Certainly Japan's aggression in China could be viewed as an imperial war. Japan sought to expand its power at the expense of China. Japan did not envision the disappearance of the Chinese. Italy's aggression against Ethiopia, again, we can see this as part of the old imperial pattern. The brutality of World War II will, of course, discredit imperialism. World War II belligerents sought the annihilation of whole peoples, Jews and other people deemed ineligible for life. Euthanasian programs in Nazi Germany, of course, combined with the Holocaust, whereby whole peoples are slated to be destroyed. I'm reminded also of the massacre at Katyn, whereby Stalin systematically executes more than 20,000 of the Polish officer corps in an attempt to decapitate that country. This, of course, takes place in 1940. And of course, you have the rape of Nanking, where the Japanese army went mad at the beginning of the Second World War in China. The belligerents in both wars, see if we can draw some similarities here. They both drew on nationalism and the ability to extract maximum effort from their human resources, from their industrial resources, and from their technological resources. The result, of course, was unprecedented loss of life and loss of wealth and treasure. The scope of the fighting: the Great War of 1914 was confined to Western Eurasia, to the North Atlantic, North Africa, the Middle East. In the Second World War, every continent is a site of conflict. Every ocean, including the Arctic oceans, see conflict. Even a place as far away as Australia is bombed in the Second World War. Alaska and Hawaii are both touched by the Second World War, Siberia as well. Large portions of Africa are impacted by the Second World War. And of course, these colonial peoples, these people that have been imposed upon by imperialism, they get drawn into the Second World War as well, not only fighting locally, but fighting for the mother country, in many cases Great Britain. So upheaval is all over the globe. The Second World War is truly global. Significances of the Great War, and when I say the Great War, I'm talking about World War I from 1914 to 1918. The United States becomes a military and economic global power as a result of World War I. Remember that the United States is strengthened, not weakened, by the Great War. President Wilson's 14 points set the agenda for the Paris Peace Conference. Wilson's self-determination set the world ablaze for a while, as colonized peoples believed that their freedom was at hand. Japan, of course, emerged from the Great War stronger than before, just as the U.S. did. The British Empire will begin to weaken and then crack up. India and many other British dominions believed that they had earned their independence by their efforts and support during these wars. Of course, other significances of the Great War: the four great empires of Europe are destroyed. The Ottoman Empire is divided up into what today we call the Middle East. If you go back and look at the Ottoman Empire and at the end of the war to see how it's divided among the British and the French mandates, and then later the creation of the states that we know today. Germany, of course, is amputated as a result of Versailles. In the east with the Polish corridor, in the north and in the west, the provinces bordering France. The myth of German weakness is belied by the emergence of a very powerful Nazi state within 20 years. The supposed German weakness led to British sympathy for Germany. This will have an impact as we near the origins of the Second World War. Russia, of course, had been defeated by the Germans in World War I, but then the Germans were defeated by the Allies. The defeat of both Germany and Russia led to the creation of many new, small, weak countries: Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Austria, Hungary, Romania, and others. These, of course, are the seeds of the Second World War, and they are the living manifestation of self-determination. This sequence of events allowed the Russian Revolution to proceed and to establish the world's first communist country, the Soviet Union. The Bolsheviks, this is synonymous with the Russian Communist Party. The Bolsheviks, of course, were not invited to Versailles to participate in the Paris Peace Conference. The Versailles Treaty, of course, will rapidly will be seen as unjust, and treaties that are viewed as illegitimate are not likely to be followed. And of course, we'll watch Hitler as he tears up the Versailles Treaty page by page. It's only a matter of time, obviously, before revisions to Versailles will be sought. Hitler would devote the first part of his career to destroying this treaty in his attempt to reverse the outcome of the First World War. So this is a brief introduction trying to draw some contrast and a few similarities between the two great wars of the first half of the 20th century. Thank you.